In the spring of 165 AD, the Roman Empire was swelling under the weight of its glory. Marcus Aurelius ruled with wisdom, and victory had just returned from the east. But the soldiers brought back more than trophies. They brought something unseen, something that whispered in lungs before it screamed from the skin. In the city of Seleucia, where marble columns cracked under the desert heat, a Roman physician named Gaius Cassianus documented strange symptoms in a private scroll. He wrote of fires that burned like coals, of fevers that sang in the bones, and of men who wept blood in the dark. He thought it was a local affliction, maybe divine punishment from neglected gods. But when a supply caravan carried wounded soldiers from Parthia to Rome, something else traveled with them. By the time the wagons reached Capua, the oxen had collapsed from exhaustion, and one of the guards had clawed his own throat open in a fit of choking. Witnesses claimed his last words were a warning, "Do not unwrap the dead." The first to fall in Rome was a servant girl in the imperial kitchen. She developed a high fever, followed by pustules on her neck that oozed black fluid. 3 days later, she was gone. Within a week, 15 more were buried in haste, no rites, no incense, just lime and fire. Panic took hold not in the slums, but in the palaces. One evening, Gaius was summoned to a temple near the Forum. The high priest had collapsed at the altar during prayer, blood streaming from his eyes as the idol of Apollo wept crimson tears down its marble face. No cuts, no cracks. The blood came from nowhere. The priest sealed the temple, declaring it cursed. But Gaius didn't believe in curses. Not then. The fever didn't burn through the body, it hollowed it. There were no gods here, only a shadow that moved between lungs, between water jugs, between the breath of lovers. And Rome, bloated with conquest and celebration, would soon choke on the invisible hand of death. By the second month, Rome stank of lime and smoke. Funeral pyres flickered across the Tiber like stars fallen from the sky. The streets were emptied not by fear, but by exhaustion. The gravediggers collapsed faster than the dying. Gaius Cassianus moved from house to house, scribbling symptoms in his leather-bound codex. He had long since abandoned treatment, nothing worked. Not oils, not leeches, not prayer. The disease moved faster than understanding. He began to notice something strange. All the afflicted shared one common symptom in their final hours, a glassy sheen in the eyes, followed by what he called tenebrae oculis, the black eye. It wasn't bruising. It was as if their irises were swallowed by shadow, until they looked not human, but ancient stone statues staring into a world they no longer recognized. He wrote, "I have looked into the eyes of 29 dying men. Only one spoke before death. He said, 'It sees through me.'" Across the city, the plague reached the imperial court. Emperor Marcus Aurelius remained stoic, issuing edicts, feeding the hungry, and building clinics. But one evening, while watching the fires beyond Palatine Hill, he staggered. He vomited bile flecked with blood, his breath short, his hands trembling. The emperor had fallen ill. He summoned Gaius privately to his chamber, away from the priests and generals. There, in the candlelight, the emperor removed his tunic. His chest was marked by a single round pustule, ringed in red. But stranger still, he wasn't afraid. Instead, he handed Gaius a scroll sealed in wax. "It was given to me by an oracle in Ephesus years ago," the emperor whispered. "She said not to open it unless Rome bled from within." Gaius broke the seal. The parchment inside was faded, but legible. It spoke of a heat without fire, a black smoke that lives in breath, and a figure known only as Nerthus, the forgotten goddess of plague and soil. But what chilled Gaius wasn't the prophecy, it was the final line. When the eyes turn black, the earth must be fed. Later that night, a tremor shook the city. Not an earthquake, something deeper. In the sewers beneath the Forum, hundreds of rats poured from the drains, fleeing as if something beneath the earth had awoken. The emperor whispered one final thing before slipping into fevered sleep: "Burn the temple beneath the palace." No one must enter. But it was too late. 3 days later, the emperor slipped into unconsciousness. Rome waited with bated breath. Some prayed. Most fled. But Gaius Cassianus, driven by the words in that prophecy, descended into the forbidden chamber beneath the imperial palace, the temple no one spoke of, carved into the rock during Rome's pagan infancy. Torch in hand, he passed crumbling mosaics of forgotten gods, serpents with human faces, women with mouths sealed in gold thread, altars stained in black. At the lowest level, he found it, a circular room lined in volcanic stone, where the air throbbed with unnatural warmth. In the center, a well sealed with iron chains. This was Nerthus's mouth, a sacred pit of offerings, sealed centuries ago when Rome abandoned its oldest rites. But something had disturbed it. The ground was damp. The chains had been broken. And above the well, scrawled in Old Latin, a single phrase shimmered in ochre paint: "The eye opens once every age." Gaius felt the fever before he heard it. A low thrum, not sound, but vibration, like breath drawn through a dying lung. His torch dimmed. A gust of hot, foul-smelling air rose from the pit. He staggered back as the darkness below blinked. It had an eye. Not a metaphor. Not a symbol. An enormous, slick, black eye blinking from the abyss below. Suddenly, the pieces aligned. The prophecy. The black irises. The blood from the eyes. The plague was not just illness, it was communion. Rome had grown too large, fed too long without offering anything in return. Nerthus was not punishing them. She was collecting. The earth had been starved of sacrifice. And now it had begun to feed. Gaius fled the chamber, sealing it behind him with what strength remained. He returned to his chambers and wrote everything in a final scroll: what he saw, what he feared, what he buried below Rome. He ended with a plea: if this returns, do not fight it. Feed it quickly. 3 weeks later, the emperor died. The plague didn't stop, but it waned. As if satisfied. As if, for now, the eye had closed again. Gaius's scroll was lost in the fire of 191 AD. But fragments were recovered beneath the baths of Caracalla centuries later, pages scorched, ink smeared, but one line remained: it lives beneath us still. Waiting. Hungry.